Hello and welcome to the 42 Rugby Weekly. Gavan Casey here, and I'm joined as always by my esteemed colleague with the 42, Murray Kinsella. Murray, how are you? How's your week been going?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that lovely intro. How are you?
I am superb. Thank you very much. Bernard Jackman joins us also. Great to see you, Birch. How are things on your end?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. Loving the Perpignan jersey. Obviously back in the top 14. Yeah,
glory hunting.
Nice piece of
kit. Waited for them to get promoted before breaking it out. How are you keeping, Birch? You all right?
Yeah, really good. Thank you.
Great. Stacked show coming up. We're going to chat about Lions. Naturally enough, the team was just named for the weekend, moments before we started recording. A little bit about the issues facing a couple of the Pacific Islands at the moment as well. Irish women's rugby and issues with the AIL schedule. Jerry Flannery and the Northern Hemisphere's great entertainers, Harlequins, and their Premiership success. Ireland, who face Japan in an eagerly anticipated sequel this weekend, and also the Ireland 20s, who have a pivotal clash of their own, far more important in all reality, against England tonight, as we record actually on Thursday. So, big one, loads to get through. The only thing is we do have to start with a little bit of housekeeping, and I guess the topic of discussion that's dominated most rugby circles this week, Bernard, and that's the question whether or not you will be taking over the Leinster Academy.
Big rumour,
which is completely unfounded. At least when I start a rumour, there's some semblance of truth in it. No, I'm very happy in my day job and as director of rugby invective, and yeah, I think it's a great role for someone, but it certainly won't be included in my CV anyway.
Jackman kills speculation.
Dismisses links. Yeah. No, listen, you never know when you're going to get an exclusive out of Birch in the pod, so it was worth checking. But yeah, he did call bullshit on it during the week, all right. Yeah, so we will be chatting to members tomorrow, and we'll be delighted to still include Birch as part of the squad for that Lions chat. For members, you got an email about it if you want to join us. Video chat, Zoom. We did one similar, was it for the Six Nations, Murray, I think? And we'll kind of keep it conversational, so everyone's on the screen, everyone gets a chance to ask questions on screen and contribute that way if they prefer, or equally you can ask questions and suggestions, make suggestions in the chat as well. It's all part of our membership Lions offering. And Murray, you can kind of recite this, I think, better than me at this stage. What else have we got coming up over the coming weeks? Remind people.
Yeah, well, I can't wait for the members event. The last one was great crack, and obviously we're all excited to get back in person, do one of those events in Liberty Hall or wherever it is. But at the moment we're still online, and it was good fun last time. Good rugby chat. We've loads going on. On Monday, myself and Owen Toolan did a video analysis show. Really enjoyable to show some clips and do some analysis. On Tuesday, with a members newsletter about the Lions wings, a bit of analysis there. I have another one coming on Friday. We have post-match podcasts. We have all sorts of stuff going on with the Lions, including those live events which you've mentioned. So it's a great time if people haven't signed up. Obviously, I'm biased, but there's loads going on, and you get plenty of bang for your buck with all the rugby that's on. Not just Lions, all the Ireland stuff as well. And there's just brilliant rugby on at the moment. So we have plenty more kind of behind the scenes if people want to join us.
Certainly do. Members.the42.ie if you want to join us there for all of that extra Lions rugby content, and to support our independent sports journalism as well. It's always appreciated. Let's get stuck into it then. The Pacific Islands, and this is kind of a weird one. We were going to chat about Tonga, Bernard, and the reports during the week, or at least some of the discussion online, that they were having to reach out to amateur players at New Zealand clubs in order to fill a squad to face the All Blacks, which would be an indication certainly that at least in some quarters the game is not in great health. And then only probably a day later we hear that the Samoa Sevens men's and women's team are stuck in a hotel in Dubai and will remain there, it seems, until the 27th of July, because there's only one repatriation flight per month from Dubai back to Samoa. We'll start with that one because it's a little bit more crazy, but by all accounts, and this was Daniel Leo who was confirming this online, there were problems with their blood tests, or they didn't meet some kind of requirement by the Samoan Ministry of Health, and therefore they're stuck there for a month. Is that the reality of the situation, to your knowledge?
Yeah, at the moment. And again, it's typical of I suppose how low maintenance these Pacific Island teams generally are, in that, if this happened to any other team, if they were delayed 6 hours to be, it'd be a press release demanding, help and get us home and all this stuff. And they've been stuck. They've been stuck there, unknowns to me, to be honest, until I saw Dan Leo tweeting about it yesterday. And his latest information is that the Samoan government are blocking them because the blood test that they did don't meet this Minister of Health standards. And now they got to wait till 27th of July. In fairness, I see the United Arab Emirates Rugby Federation have reached out to Dan Leo, and Apollo Perlini, who I played with in Sale, has an academy down there, so he's been helping him out. I mean, realistically, it's horrendous. These guys, they wouldn't have a huge amount of financial strength. I mean, their families are probably relying on them back home to get home and get back to work. I mean, that was the nature of that competition, is that some teams, particularly Pacific Island and Hong Kong, couldn't send their strongest teams because of quarantine and fears around getting back out. And it's terrible. Hopefully World Rugby now are on it, and something can be done to get them back, or even get them to New Zealand, where at least they would have more family and more support. It must be pretty difficult for them being stuck down there. So yeah, look, it's not ideal at all, but it's just some of the trials and tribulations that, Dan Leo did a documentary that probably opened up our eyes to how difficult it is and how they need our support. And I know that some people in World Rugby don't agree with him, but certainly for me, from my experience of dealing with Pacific Island coaches and players, a lot of what he says is true, and he's looking for more fairness and more support for them. And the fact that Tonga are reaching out to club players in New Zealand to play the All Blacks, I mean, it's great for the players who get the opportunity, but it's going to be an incredibly difficult occasion for them. And you could argue, from a safety point of view, is it even safe to go from that level of amateur rugby to test match against the All Blacks so quickly, so yeah, we only really usually hear about this World Cup year because there's more focus on it. But I think it's horrendous what's happened, but again, if it leads to better support for them, well, then it'll be a good thing. But unfortunately, history would tell you that there isn't a huge amount done to look after these guys outside of World Cup year, where they want them to be competitive at the World Cup. I think more can be done.
Can I bring you in on the Tonga situation, Murray? Because I have to plead ignorance here. I wouldn't have had any idea that it would have... I suppose that it would have been this bad for them, or this stark for them, that they would have to do this. And how has that come about, do you know?
So the issue basically is they only have one test. They're playing the All Blacks, and that's it. There's no other games after that. So getting guys in from Europe with all the COVID restrictions and all that kind of stuff was basically not feasible. So there is that issue. Like, it's obviously unlucky and unfortunate timing in that sense that they get a chance to play against the All Blacks, but they're not able to have their best players over. So essentially, yeah, they've gone out and they've been recruiting and trying to find guys who are eligible, basically, across New Zealand. And they're playing an All Blacks team, which is a little bit experimental, but it's still world class. Richie Mo'unga, Will Jordan, Ioane, Papali, like the list of names is really stellar. So it's going to be a hugely difficult task for them with a 23 match day 23, including 13 guys making their test debuts. Like, it could be a cricket score. It could just get out of hand. Fingers crossed they can produce something and backs against the wall and really rally. But you're looking through the team, even for nerds like myself and Birch, like, you're looking through the team going, I don't know these players. I haven't seen them play. There's a couple of Super Rugby guys or guys with experience at that level, but not standouts either. So it's going to be a really difficult task. And you're kind of questioning the value of it. Like, it's such a pity that, as I say, they get a big test, but it's not going to be a good experience for most of these guys. And some of them probably will never play again for Tonga, and it'll be a tough memory. So obviously the world is a tricky place at the moment, but it's just a pity maybe that they couldn't have had another test or more meaningful games to get those guys over from Europe.
it's been a tricky time over the last 16 months, particularly I think for women's rugby as well. And Murray, fair to say that the Irish women's rugby community is pretty pissed off with the AIL schedule. Can you fill us in on that?
Yeah, so there is real frustration out there. So was it last week they announced here's the AIL schedule expanded to 10 teams for the women's league, obviously, and you kind of go, this is great news. We're seeing club fixtures back. And then you get a couple of messages going, hang on, these fixtures are actually going to clash with big important things. So basically, the Interpros and the World Cup qualifier comp, which is yet to be officially confirmed, but Ireland obviously have to qualify the World Cup. The Interpros are going to clash with that. And then next year, you're going to have a clash between the Six Nations and the Cup final and potentially some of the league playoffs as well. Obviously, the Six Nations being moved with the women's competition standalone now. So you got the scenario where the best players aren't going to be available for the league, which is just really dispiriting, and it just doesn't make a huge amount of sense when you're trying to push that league forward. And the RFU have spoken about, I suppose, getting those structures stronger beneath the national team. But if players aren't available, it's a really frustrating scenario. And from all accounts, like the English Premiership, the Premier 15s is obviously taking a step forward. There's a lot more professionalism over there. There's a lot of interest in Irish players. And I think a lot of the Irish players will have their heads turned now because they look at it and see a more sensible structure to the season, a lot more, I suppose, involvement for players and clubs in having a say in how it's run. So yeah, at the moment, there's a lot of frustration there. And it feels like, I suppose, a bit of a kind of kick in the face for people who've been hoping that the improvement of the league will help Irish women's rugby step forward. It's going to clash, there's overlaps, and it just feels a little bit disjointed again. And that's what we've been talking about quite a bit recently with Irish women's rugby.
Birch, it's hard to make sense of it, isn't it? Or, sorry, not make sense of it, but it's hard to see sense in it.
Yeah, look, it's not too late to change it, to fix it, to be honest. I mean, there's a fixture list being published, but given the fact that I don't think it makes sense to have so many of your top players away for so many games. I just think, sit down together and with the IRFU and the clubs and actually reorganise it now. It's obviously, it must have been done without much communication or understanding of what they want, or they want those players not playing club rugby. And if that's the case, come out and say it. But all the things we're hearing is that they do want it. So, it's coming out of COVID. There's a chance to restructure things. We're all pretty flexible in our approach. So if it wasn't the best possible fixture list and it can be done better, well then just sit down with the people involved and make it better. And if there has to be the odd clash, okay, I'm sure that people will accept that. But I just don't think there's any point in ramming this through when it's creating discontent at a time when we're trying to create unity.
They should strike.
It's baffling that Gav. It's baffling that there is overlap. Like, women's rugby is not professional. There's not a huge amount of fixtures. There's no Champions Cup. There's no other competition. Like, how can they not get it to the point where an Ireland international can play all the clubs' fixtures, and important ones? Like, a cup final is massive in your development as a player. It should be a key part of your build-up to hopefully a World Cup in New Zealand. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, it's not this massive overlap of loads of fixtures. There's a clear international calendar there, and then you would imagine the clubs can work around that. But it sounds like they're not even at the table, really, to be honest, that they're not part of the process of actually putting the calendar down.
They should strike. I'm not even messing. Like, the Camogie players, a month ago, when they had an issue with the championship structure and how their season was going to play out, they went on strike, and funnily enough, it got fixed. Like, the players are the most important commodity. Can't do much without them. Yeah,
the revolution starts here, Gav. You can lead it.
I will. No, I think we can leave it. We can leave it to a few of the women, I'm pretty sure. But in happier news, we saw Harlequins win the Premiership last week, as you predicted, Birch. And
great shout.
It really was a great shout, and it really was also an unbelievable game of ball. It's a happy ending to Jerry Flannery's season as well. I think part of all of us was probably, well, I don't know, is it fair to say we were kind of half up for Harlequins? But like, Exeter have had like an unbelievable couple of years. It's nice to see a new team win, and particularly when you have that little Irish connection there as well. So what did you make of it?
Yeah, it was a phenomenal game. I think Marcus Smith is at the peak of his powers at the moment. He is just loving his rugby, and he's having a huge impact on games. And I think the team is being set up to play to his strength. And it's brilliant to see a young 10. We often speak about Johnny Sexton's ability to influence games, but I think Smith is at a level beyond his years at the moment. It's fascinating the way attack has, like, Harlequins conceded the most points. I actually bumped into Les Kiss this morning just randomly at a coffee shop, and we were chatting about it, and he said, like, it goes kind of against the whole belief that defence wins championships, because they actually conceded, I think, the most points this year. But in the two semi-finals, their philosophy around all-out attack, against Bristol, got them back from whatever 25 or 6-0 down, or maybe 28-0 down, and then obviously against Exeter they looked beaten. At one stage, Rob Baxter was interviewed, and it looked like Exeter were in control. And in fairness to him, he said, "I'd just like to see us have 10 minutes where we control the game," and then he gave away a penalty, and next thing Quins are down the other end scoring. So it's phenomenal. I've been trying to read as much and listen to as much as I can about it, because it's a really good case study in terms of obviously that trauma of Gustard leaving, how the coaches reacted to that. It's pretty obvious the coaches were with Gustard. They believed in him and were friendly with him. And I read Adam Jones, the former Welsh prop, saying, and I know this because I've been in that environment where when the head coach gets sacked, you automatically think, am I next? And it kind of destabilizes the whole project. And Quins were at a tricky stage where they'd already decided, Mike Brown was going to move on, and they were starting to kind of rebuild a team in the kind of Gustard fashion. And obviously, it didn't work out. He moved on, and suddenly they didn't have a head coach. And Billy Millard, who actually used to coach in Connacht, and was a kind of a head of recruitment for Cardiff, and was doing that role as a kind of the guy used to be role in Quins. He stepped back down into the kind of coaching box and facilitated the coaches. And Nick Evans apparently, really stood up to be counted. And he was the only one of the coaches, from what I gather, because Billy wasn't a kind of a long-standing Harlequin, Jerry wasn't, Adam Jones wasn't. There might be someone else there who was, but apparently Nick Evans really kind of led the way in terms of what Quins are about. And obviously down with Danny Kerr and Mike Brown and Joe Marler, players who were involved in Conor O'Shea's era and win, drove that. And yeah, they rebounded, and it's been a phenomenal. I watched them the first day they played Wasps, the first week match after Gustard left, and it was a brilliant performance. They smashed Wasps in Wasps, and but you're always worried, is that just an emotional backlash? Is that just a reaction? And can they carry that on? And they did. And it wasn't picture perfect. They had little blips, since then over the last 5 months. But their mental strength, their belief, is phenomenal, And look at Exeter. Exeter looked tired. I thought Exeter, they're not as dominant as they were, and it's hard to come back every year. But Quins deserve massive credit. But what I'm interested in is, Bristol obviously have a very attacking mindset. Exeter have a very attacking mindset. Quins have a very attacking mindset. Saracens are coming back up. We know their mindset is a little bit different. But just in terms of, is this the way the game is going? And, are attacks now going to be, teams with the best attack are going to be the most dominant, or was just an outlier? And next year, teams who defend, kick very well, scrum very well, are going to be back dominant. But I think that's all coaches over the course of the next month before they get their teams back in pre-season are going to be trying to work out, where the game is going, and is the Quins way or the Bristol way the way forward.
That's what I love about this, Murray, as well, though. In all sports, when you get to the games upon which a team's season hinges or will be defined, right? There is an element usually of conservatism that, excuse me, kind of seeps into a team's mindset, because it's like, this is it. It's human nature that you would kind of maybe take fewer chances, or you don't want to be the player to make a mistake. You don't want to invite the opposition into the game and so on. And Quins seem to just have the courage to like relish it, enjoy it, even in those moments to which Bernard alludes where they were down both in the semi-final and the final. It's like their belief doesn't waver, and they play their way back into it by playing, you know. I find that phenomenal, and it must be the sign of like just an unbelievable environment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick Evans has spoken a lot about players taking ownership for it. It's something we speak about with most of the good teams. Like, what suits Quins? Marcus Smith is just an attacking player with loads of flair, loads of creativity, vision. Dom Brandt at number 8, obviously he can be powerful and good in close quarters, but he loves to play offload, make line breaks, be in wider channels. It just suits the profile of that team. And there was always a sense of like nothing to lose, really. Obviously the season, as Bernard's like encapsulated there, wasn't going well, and they managed to turn around, and then you've got that kind of freewheeling sense of let's keep this flowing. We've nothing to lose here. And in fairness to Premiership, which in the past I haven't watched a huge amount of, if I'm being honest. I've watched a lot more this season, and it is thrilling rugby regularly. Like high scores, loads of attacking intent. Birch has mentioned the different teams there, and it's wonderful rugby to watch. So fingers crossed this is a trend. Quins as well, they had loads of like gritty stuff as well that like lays the foundation, doesn't it? Joe Marler in ridiculously good form. What a defender he is. Tough as nails. Such a good work rate. The likes of Esther Hazen was really important in midfield, really powerful, a bit of a focal point, defensive work rate off the charts. And that's a funny thing. They conceded loads of points, but you could pick out some brilliant defensive clips from that game from Quins as well. So yeah, the style of rugby in the Premiership for me is really exciting, because I'm also hopeful, like Birch is, that this is the way the game is going, and we're going to see a lot more rugby like this.
Let's chat Lions then, and it's going to be pretty exciting as well, you'd imagine. What do you make of that team, Bernard, firstly, that was named this morning by Warren Gatland? We didn't expect to see any of the 7 Irish guys involved last weekend involved this time around, only 2 on the bench, but some interesting combinations, and I guess it's a time for excitement until a ball is kicked, because we're just sort of trying to create in our minds an image of what it might look like.
Yeah, I think obviously Bundy and Robbie were excellent last week, and you know, Farrell and Chris Harris are going to be very much aware that they need to lay down a marker. You know, I wonder, is the Conor Murray captaincy a sign that Gats isn't sure Owen Farrell's going to be a starter in the team? You know, and is he going to be someone who can come on the bench as a second playmaker, or as a 10, come off the bench as a second playmaker or 10, with Bigger being first choice, and going for those more powerful options, which is obviously Harris, Henshaw or Aki. Ali Price and Finn Russell, you know, obviously used to playing together for Scotland. I think it's a good team. I mean, it's a very aggressive, mobile. It's a, you know, basically a big English influence on the pack. Courtney Laws at 6, Johnny Hill, Atoje, you know, Jamie George, Falatau. Like it's a very, very strong pack, and I think they'll be ready to do a job on the lines on Saturday, and yeah, just get this tour. You know, last week we were worried about the fact will it go ahead. You know, it'll just be great to see them play and get up and running. But it's the Irish lads. Bundy's obviously the only Irish player involved. He's on the bench. Henderson as well. But it's a very strong team. I mean, when you see the quality of the team he could put out last week, and then, you know, so many changes this week, it's going to be a real hot debate around the test team.
What excites you most about the team, Murray?
I'm really excited to see Owen Farrell play at 12. This is something we probably anticipated and spoke about, him being a good option there. Obviously, that's where he plays for England. That's where he played the last 2 Lions tests as well. He came on there last weekend. And the Lions spent the majority of his time on the pitch defending, but there was one little glimpse where back-to-back phases, Bigger plays first receiver, then Farrell plays first receiver. They come back, swing to the left, and they're kind of late into shape where Farrell's first receiver and Bigger's out the back of that kind of forward pod. So it gives you an idea of the model that they're looking at again. And it did work really well in 2017 with Sexton and Farrell. I thought it was really influential in probably turning the series around. They didn't go there for the first test. I think they should have. It was a mistake in my eyes. And they, I think, are looking at that model again. Obviously, the power of Aki and Harris and Henshaw is really attractive as well, but you have to have players to kind of unlock the door, don't you? Especially that Springboks door, which is reinforced and steel plated. It's such a strong defense. So it is going to be key to have guys who have that little bit of creativity. The kicking skill as well is something else. So excited to see him play. And it is it's a really strong team. The Lions could have, the Golden Lions, the local South African team, will have a tough day. I think their squad is not particularly strong. Also excited to see Lewis Rees-Zammit play, because I mean, this kid is 20 years old. He's been a sensation for Wales, and you just sense that if he continues his momentum, could carry him all the way to the test team. It would be thrilling to see a guy like that go and do a bit of a Brian O'Driscoll in 2001, become a bit of a Lions legend at an early stage, and he's got all the ability to go and do that.
He certainly does. He could do a Georgie North in 2013 as well, Birch. Like, it was North around that age, or?
Yeah, he was. He's got very different than North. North was kind of a power athlete when, you know, rugby players weren't as big and strong across the board. But what Rees-Zammit has is just ridiculous pace. And I mean, you know, that's going to be absolute key, because I think, you know, looking at the box and how they defend under Nino Bar, it's a very, very aggressive, you know, rush from out to in. But sometimes that last defender can be, you know, nearly second posts. So you have to go very deep to go over or to get around it or go over the top of it. And then obviously you need someone with real wheels to beat the scramble. And you know, that's more important than power against this type of opposition. So I would say Gatland is, you know, has been obviously watching him with Gloucester and Wales, but I think I would have him in the test team, to be honest, at the moment. Obviously he's got to go and step up to this level, but I think his unique super strength could be key to unlocking that Springbok defence.
The other little interesting thing is second row now, obviously with Alan Wynne-Jones gone. Like, he's your tight headlock out of the team. So Johnny Hill, obviously his chances greatly increase. A guy that probably wouldn't have been seen as a test line by many people. But there's a slot there, obviously. Maro Toje is going to be favourite to start, probably call the line out. But I think Ian Henderson also has a really good chance. He often plays loose headlock and scrummages on that side. But you saw him last weekend, he switched over. He called the line out really well. Bert, you'd obviously be able to give a bit more insight on that, but it seemed to run really smoothly. And he's a guy with momentum as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's someone, he wasn't a natural liner caller, but he's someone that's, and that he's probably been held back a little bit by the type of lock that Ulster have signed over the last, 10 years really, where they've always gone for a line-out marshal as their foreign player and allowed Ian, you know, do the other stuff. But I think Paul has identified pretty quickly that he needs to upskill in that area, and I think he's been working really hard, and I think he's now a very competent line of caller, which is going to be key. And in fairness, that was probably something that Beard, Alan Wynne-Jones is not a line of caller, so they didn't have, but he was worth so much in other areas that he's well worth his place on the team. But I think Beard coming in has a different skill set than Alan Wynne-Jones, and Henderson now has to compete with obviously the Johnny Hills and but Adam Beard's particularly in that he's calling lineouts for Gatland, has done a massive job on the Welsh lineout over the last year, and that could be something that is a bit of a bolter. So not originally on the squad, but could quickly become a test player.
Can we chat about captaincy for a while, lads? I know, Murray, you were caught by surprise by by Conor Murray's announcement as Skips, as he's become known during the week. But Birch, your immediate reaction at the time, if you could give me on a scale of 1 to 10, how shocked were you, or would you have had a suspicion that Murray might have been in the frame?
Zero clue, to be honest. I didn't see it coming at all, and. But it's very typical Warren, and he doesn't generally go with the flow. He'll make his own decision. And look at it, I'm sure as a coaching group, they've gone through this, with a fine tooth comb and a fine comb and have looked at it. And I think it's obviously because they were sure he was going to be first choice, and I think they obviously see a huge amount of calmness in him, and that's maybe with the overall mix of the other players and the Toje being so vocal and what other combinations they have, they probably feel having a really calm, experienced line who can obviously captain this squad, because that's the key. That it's not just being able to captain the 23 who play against the box and the 3 tests. It's about having universal likability, the credibility to go to the management and say, look, at the feedback from the players is we're not training enough, we're training too hard, selection isn't clear or whatever, or the feedback isn't good enough, and have that credibility. I think Conor has that. I think Conor is unbelievably comfortable in his own skin, believes in his ability without being arrogant or anything like that. But the fact that he's been on, he's so experienced as a line, he's worked under some unbelievable captains, and maybe this is his opportunity to go from zero to hero in captaincy stakes, and with very little experience captaining a winning test series, which is pretty incredible. But I didn't see it coming, but when I look at it, it kind of makes sense. And as I said, I think they obviously wanted probably a Celtic captain, and someone who's respected and liked, and Conor definitely is.
Why a Celtic captain, Birch?
I just think I don't know. It just tends to happen over the last few tours. England normally, I don't know. I haven't looked at exact stats, but my good feeling is that they generally provide most of the players, and it's just good to have that balance, in your team. So, there's no science, or I haven't done data on this, but that's just my good feeling.
It's like the way Scottish people just make better commentators for some reason. Something in the voice, isn't it? Something guttural. But Murray, seriously, in relation to Conor Murray, like, this is the culmination of what's been, I wouldn't go as far as to say a turbulent period of his career, because I think he's like very much steadied the ship, but for that reason he deserves enormous credit. It's almost time to pay him his dues again, the way we used to, in a way. Like, he did go through a time when certainly a lot of people around the country, rugby fans I mean, were either writing him off or deeming him unworthy of a starting berth in Andy Farrell's team. At times you could argue even justifiably, but like, long story short, he has come back roaring, like, and is in really good form, and to be rewarded with this is, it's a career highlight at a time when we actually suspected he might have none left at one point.
Yeah, well, he was honest and candid in saying that when the squad was named this time around, like, he wasn't sure he was in it at all. The previous times he was probably confident enough that he was going to get in. Obviously in 2017 he was nailed on really as a starter. In 2013 he was a young player who had loads of momentum. But he'd tell you this time he wasn't sure if he was going to be in the squad, and now he's the captain. I think you slagged me in written form during the week for picking Thomas Williams as my starting lines scrum half a year ago. And honestly, like, it sounds silly now, but at the time, Conor Murray wasn't playing his best rugby. And it was, I suppose some of the criticism was fair, but he has rebounded, and his rugby over the last season has been really outstanding. He's been back to his best. But it's a massive, massive ask and job. Like, I still find it crazy to be saying Lions captain Conor Murray. It just sounds so strange, even after several days of digesting it. And I'm sure he's getting his head around it. It's been great that he's repeatedly said, I'm just going to try and be myself, because that is exactly what you want. You don't want him trying to come up with deadly speeches that are going to be on the next Lions documentary. Just be yourself. Like Bundy Aki, Farrell, they're going to be roaring and screaming at everyone. Let them do that and be yourself. But like, he's going to be in strange positions that he's not been in before. Imagine those test games when the Boks are absolutely piling on the pressure. Things maybe go against the Lions. He is a very composed character, but he's going to be exposed to different stresses that he never has been exposed to before. And you'd imagine the Boks are going to be saying, let's pile it on him. Let's absolutely pile it on him. So it's going to be a huge challenge. I'm still getting my head around it. I think the thing Birch mentioned about Farrell not being a definite test starter is key here. I thought he'd be the next in line for captaincy, to be honest. But it's obviously in Gallen's head that he could go a different way in midfield. So yeah, Murray steps up, having not done the job. He did it for Munster once. Never an underage captain. Always a kind of quieter figure, although obviously confident and has loads of self-belief, a quieter figure around squad. So it is a massive leap, but it's another, as you say, string to his bow and another thing on his CV that is incredible, really. His career has been remarkable. Came back from that neck injury, took him a while to get going again, but he's playing brilliant rugby.
It was interesting during the week, Burke, hearing Jamie George, while he was absolutely waxing lyrical about Murray, the guy, and he said they became very close, for example, on the 2017 tour. He stressed he thinks Murray would do a great job, but that he would probably be less vocal than most of the captains that George has played with. And I wonder, how much does that change the dynamic? Does it mean that other players need to step up even more? The likes of Farrell and Aki, as Murray mentions there. Or does a guy with Murray who kind of brings that level of gravitas, and to be fair, is not averse to communicating with referees at the best of times, like, is his kind of usual personality enough to do the role, as he says, and just being himself and not really trying to do more than that?
No, look, I don't think he'll change. I think he will appreciate that he's intelligent enough to know he's been given captain for the type of character he is, and Gatland and Co won't want him to become a tyrant, roaring and screaming. As Murray said, there's enough guys in that everyone's just going to be true to themselves. The reason they're top end players is because they bring consistency in terms of their personality type, in terms of behaviour. So I just think that they'll all stick to what they are. Like Ian Henderson isn't a guy who's very, very vocal, but he's a hell of a good captain for Ulster. So Conor, he's seen captains who've tried to maybe change or adapt, and generally doesn't work out. So I just think he'll be that calming influence, and that can maybe give people reassurance as well when the captain is so relaxed about what to do next, and what the strategy is, and where they're going. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It's just another layer of interest in this tour for all of us to see how Conor adapts as captain, and can that bring his own game to another level. The challenge will be, obviously, I think he'll do a great job as captain. The challenge will be to be a dominant 9, against these Boks. And part of the I spoke about why Lewis Rees-Zammit could be important to the team. Having a 9 that can run and probe is particularly important against this rush as well, because the line speed comes from the third defender out, and 1 and 2 either side of the ruck need to hold back a little bit to protect around there. So Conor's ability to find little holes there, and get his nose through contact, and maybe make the odd line break will be key in itself. Plus, obviously, the aerial game and being able to kick accurately and get some of those contestables back. So I'd love to see if it can bring his game to another level again, because obviously at his best he's top end.
It was good to see him make a couple of those little scooting runs and an inside ball to Duhan van der Merwe at one stage last weekend. Birch, in your experience, you've obviously played with captains, you've appointed captains. Is there something that they all share, or is there different forms of being a good captain? Yeah,
there's massively different forms, and I think sometimes it's so. Leo Cullen's very similar to Conor in terms of never stressed, always calm, but in the dressing room before a game, it was someone like Shane Jennings or Sean O'Brien who were leading the riot act or making sure everyone was up for it. But Leo was just this real calm head, and I think that'll be kind of how Conor does it. And then Brian was Driscoll. He could vary. He really read the room, and sometimes he'd be nice and calm, relaxed, and if he felt we had a poor warm up or we had a poor prep or whatever, he'd let the team have it. Paul was pretty consistent. He was always kind of driving things. Raj was different. He'd reach people kind of very emotional intelligent, and would just hit the right note to kind of dial in with you. And in terms of appointing captains in France, you need to find. Andrew Farley was our captain. He's bilingual, well respected by all the French players. In Wales, Corey Hill with the Dragons again was really respected. By numbers 30 to 40, and that's it varies in terms of what you go for. But it depends on your squad as well, and you have other people who can pick up the charge and really drive things Monday to Friday. And if you do, well, then you can have a captain who's probably a little bit quieter and calmer. But it does depend on the overall mix you have. And I'm sure that was part of the reason they went for Conor, is obviously they felt, that Owen Farrell's going to drive things anyway, and you can probably afford to have a quieter captain if you have those kind of guys who are given the fuel during the week and pre-match.
Yeah, like the shared leadership is a common theme, not just sports. Like it's in every organisation now. Even our WhatsApp group. Some weeks it's Gav driving things on. Some weeks I step up. You, Birch, are very good for leading the way. But seriously, in rugby teams, and we always do it after the fact. We go, oh, he was an amazing captain. And obviously there's guys who are just leaders of people and they can get a group going. But even if you look at, say, Martin Johnson, that England team was ridiculously laden with leaders all around and providing their own thing. Like, it is, my sense, Birch, is that in every squad now, it is a shared model. Like, it's not just one guy driving everything.
Yeah, and I like, as coaches, we spend a lot of time trying to develop better leaders, and I don't think there's a team anywhere who wouldn't have a leadership group, a game management group. Part of the work you do with your academy players is to try and help them understand what good leadership looks like, help them understand their own personality and how they can lead. And but it has to be authentic. It has to be something that's naturally part of you. And I think players and coaches are very quick to spot an imposter or someone who's putting things on. So it has to be really true to you. And that's why someone like Alan Wynne-Jones, I mean, he actually doesn't speak a huge amount, but he's just the most natural competitor that anyone who's trained, played with him, played against him for the last 15 years has come up against. So, when he says something, it's around being competitive and being consistent and being hard to beat. It's part of his DNA, and he's lived that. So, I've been in dressing rooms where people speak up and they're just bluffing, or they don't have the credibility to do it, and it's actually a massive negative. But again, good teams, they nip that in the bud pretty quick, or they don't have those type of people.
Just briefly, you mentioned Rog there. If people haven't seen on his Twitter, go have a look at the card that Darren Sweetenham sent to him and his family. It's just lovely, and it probably points to that emotional intelligence form of leadership. Like, he's good at connecting with people, and it's a lovely little note to the O'Garas. Yeah,
I actually felt really bad because the Garas were unbelievably good to me in Paris, and I was like, oh Jesus, I never sent them anything. But yeah, no, in fairness, it's such a nice touch, and it's like writing letters, and I'm not sounding old school here, but writing letters or sending cards, it's so rare now that when you do get one, it actually means way more than it would have 10 years ago. But yeah, the O'Garas are they're unbelievably hospitable, and well deserved. I'm sure they looked after Darren incredibly well, and he's shown the type of person he is to recognise that.
Yeah, we'll chat about Ireland briefly, guys, before we get into a kind of a meatier chat about the Ireland 20s, because at least we know what their team is, and that game is in the more immediate future. As we record at the moment, Ireland's senior team hasn't quite been named. I think it'll be about an hour or two after we record, unfortunately. But Murray, you expect them to field a strong team. So what are you looking for this weekend, and what kind of a team actually would you want to see play? Is it just a kind of a blend of experience and youth, or do you want to see fully experimental at this point?
I mean, I'd love to see fully experimental, because it'd be great cracking. You'd learn so much. The sounds coming out of camp are that it is basically the strongest, most experienced team he has available to him. Obviously, there's guys away with the Lions, and some of the senior guys are rested this summer. But you saw last weekend when Japan came back in the second half, I thought the Lions should have had a yellow card. The scoreline definitely would have been closer with that. They're a quality team. They haven't played for a long time. And honestly, I think Andy Farrell will look at it and go, this is obviously a tricky fixture. Like, last time they played Japan, it was a horror show. It didn't go well. And how damaging would it be for a lot of guys to lose at home to Japan and experience that with your first test of test rugby. So I am expecting a strong team. And it's a really big challenge for Ireland. Japan play with so much tempo, so much ingenuity and creativity. You saw some of their plays from line out last weekend were so smart. They've got power in the likes of Jimeno and Tatafu, who you'd expect to come into the starting team. And it's going to be a tricky one for Ireland. There'll probably be a couple of debuts off the bench, you would hope, at the very least. The likes of Gavin Coombs, who's completely earned his shot. But it's a big ask for Ireland. And the most recent outing we've had from Ireland was really impressive, in fairness, against England. Like, that's the standard they set for themselves. And you'd love to see them get back there with some of their attacking play. Obviously, the build up to the Jack Conan try in particular that day was outstanding and showed a kind of variety and multi-skill set to Ireland's attacking play. So obviously the set piece one went well, the Keith Earls try, even though that wasn't actually the intention. So we probably overcredited them at the time. It was just Jack Conan coming up with a brilliant play and Earls an outstanding finish. So you'd love to see more of that from them. It could be a really entertaining, exciting game. Like, that's the hope. When Japan are involved, it generally is. But I think a really tough ask for Ireland.
Hang on, I actually completely missed that at the time. Are you saying that was not a pre-planned move, but a little bit of improv from Conan?
It wasn't supposed to go exactly that way. They didn't anticipate that Tom Curry would be where he was. So Jack Conan was supposed to catch, gather and turn and then maybe pass. So there was an element of planning, obviously, but it wasn't quite what they expected. So fair play Jack Conan. He reacted really well.
Magic, heads up rugby. We were waiting a long time for it. Birch, I actually, and this is not to disparage Ireland, as Murray says, listen, their last game was a brilliant performance. Hopefully we have turned the corner, but I do think Japan can and might win this game just by dint of the fact that Ireland are missing half of their first choice team and Japan are coming in not quite hot maybe, but certainly warmed up from last week. Like, they have a couple of things working in their favour. They're a good team. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. If it happened, do you think it would be particularly damaging?
No, I don't think it will. I think it could happen. I think Japan are going to be a lot better this week than they were last week. Obviously, Ireland, you would expect to be a little bit cold, some new combinations that haven't played for a while. So I think it's a dangerous game. I think Japan were very disappointed with how they started against the Lions, and but you can see in the second half their attack is so intricate. It's bound to ask questions of Ireland's D, and they have some power athletes as well who are as good as any in the world. So look, I think it's a very dangerous game. I think we probably end up sneaking it, but. And I don't think if we lost, it would have a massive effect, really, to be honest, given we're without our lines and given that some of our experienced players have played. And we'll get back on the horse, to use an Eddie O'Sullivanism, next week against America, and it'll all be positive. But there is still question marks. I mean, the England game was a game which was, a really strong performance, but following an average enough tournament. I think it's important Ireland do develop some consistency, and I think for that we need to develop more depth. So, yeah, I would like to see a couple of new faces come through, particularly Coombs, who I think could go from Munster to being a first capper to being a test player, a test starter for Ireland pretty quickly. And if we can find a little bit more depth, Harry Byrne, his development's going to be fascinating as well. Obviously, Joey's the main man now. So look, there's the most important thing for us will be to develop 2 or 3 players really in this period and have them come in November as genuine starters first. I think that would be more important than beating Japan this weekend.
That leads us on nicely to the 20s, and we didn't really get a chance to get stuck into that last week. It's an insanely busy couple of weeks. I saw 1 or 2 people tweeting you, Bernard, going, thank God you brought it up towards the end. I thought I wasn't going to get a mention at all. There is always scope in the members' pods as well on Mondays. But listen, this is potentially the definitive game of this championship. It's Ireland and England. They're both coming in really good form. England have 4 changes from the team that beat Scotland last week. Ireland, then you look at the Ireland team who beat England last year and it's almost a completely different team. I don't know. What's your reading of this to begin with, Birch? Are you confident that Ireland can get the job done first and foremost before we discuss individual players?
Listen, going into this competition, I think the expectation around the team was that they would beat Wales, Scotland and Italy, and that would be a kind of job done, and anything above that would be a bonus. Just because of England England normally target the Junior World Cup, which happens in June. So when we play them in the Six Nations, sometimes they're in a little bit of experimental mode. And obviously France have been really strong at this level for the last couple of years, particularly some of the individuals they brought through. And we didn't know a lot about these guys. They haven't played for a long time, and so few of them were involved last year. But over the last 2 games, I think they've caught the eye, and they've shown that there's some serious potential here. I don't think they've hit their straps yet in terms of that cohesion and unity, which is to be expected. But I think third game up, you'll start to see more of that. And I think the most impressive thing about them has been, how some of the individuals. So Alex Soroka has been, phenomenal. For me, obviously played the first game at 6, second game and plays tonight at lock. Alex Kinsella has looked, really impressive, the captain. And we knew about Jamie Osborne. I knew about Chris Cosgrave from schools rugby. And he looks really exciting. But there's guys like Moxham I knew about from Ulster, but who looks the real deal. Shane Jennings has caught the eye, to be honest. Cathal Ford was a 10 who's now playing 12, looks really athletic, really powerful. And then Nathan Doak last weekend looked like Conor Murray, just taking it all in his stride and very, very comfortable. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating tonight. It's a good English team. I mean, they went way down against France and battled back, full of some really good players. I spoke to Conor McPhillips last night, who coaches Bristol, and he said this 13 Jack Bates is outstanding. Really, really quick, really powerful, and they expect him to become a starter for Bristol. So, tonight will tell a lot, to be honest. But so far, so good. I mean, it's just really nice to see some guys and lots of youth players. Lots of guys from non-traditional pathways. Shane Jennings was a fullback on the Galway minor hurling team, and Temi Lasisi wasn't in the original squad. Was let go by the Leinster Sub Academy. Gets called in to do a scrummaging session because they're down numbers, and now he started 2 of the 3 games ahead of a guy called Jack Boyle, who I think will play for Leinster and maybe Ireland. So came through Enniscorthy and the Leinster youth. So there's lots of nice stories about the under-20s, and if 5 or 6 of them can come from here into being regulars for Munster and some of them play for Ireland, it'd be brilliant.
Have you had a chance to see much of England, Murray?
Yeah, I watched them the last day. Very impressive. Obviously, they've got a whole lot of potential in their squad. Birch has mentioned a couple of guys. One to watch out for is Dan Lancaster, Stewart's son. He plays at 12. Very classy. Obviously, he's very classy, isn't he? He's skillful. Got a good rugby IQ on him, you can see. And the scrum half, Jack Van Poortvliet, is an outstanding prospect. He's played a lot of rugby for Leicester in the Premiership already. So we knew that he was going to be good. But they've got quality across the board, and that's the fascinating thing now. Ireland have impressed us so far, but this is certainly a step up. England are 2 bonus point wins from 2 games so far as well, and they look muscular and powerful. And that's the bit that I'm really fascinated by, is how those tight forwards for Ireland go, because they've been really impressive so far. Temi Lasisi, really impressive. Sam Illo, Harry Sheridan, a guy from Ulster, like a bit of a lump of a lock, and really good to see that kind of player coming through, especially in Ulster, where they've not had a huge amount of forwards come from the academy into playing senior rugby. He looks like a real prospect. So how they cope with that step up in physicality and sustained pressure for 80 minutes is going to be really important. It's a massive development step for all of them, and I'm fascinated to see how they handle it. Nathan Doak looked unbelievably composed last weekend. Bit extra pressure on him now. How does he go this weekend? Based on what we've seen so far, you would back him to withstand that and indeed even thrive in it. He looks like a huge prospect. And that's the exciting thing. There's certainly 3 or 4 guys from this team already who you can see are going to be good senior players in a very short space of time. So that's what it's all about at the end of the day. But they're in the middle of a tournament now where they're on a roll. They've got momentum. And already this feels like a bit of a final. So it's going to be a thrilling game.
I know you have to run for a press conference, so call it for us before we wrap, Mer.
I'm going Ireland. And Birch, I've been loving the analysis on TV so far.
Thank you. Yeah, it's on iPlayer tonight and RT News. So we don't have a panel, but I'm on CoCom. So I'm looking forward to it. I think, look at it. I love this age group, I love trying to spot guys we're going to see a lot more of. And we've been so lucky over the last 2 years, 3 years, where there's fellas who've caught our eye playing for Ireland under 20s and have gone on to do well for their provinces, and someone like Craig Casey has stepped up to get cap for Ireland. So it's fascinating. And I just stress there's a lot of guys coming here from who are outside the private school system, which is good to see.
Who does the comms on RT News now, Birch? Sharni Violan?
No,
I've not watched a match on there before, I have to say.
You have watched a match on it? I haven't.
I've never watched a match
no,
on it.
I don't know how we ended up getting in there, but glad to kick Sharni Volan out for an hour and a half, or 2 hours probably, or 3 hours the way rugby games are going, and take over with a bit of sport.
What do you reckon, Birch, Ireland or England, before we go?
Yeah, look, I think we're under I don't know what the bookies are saying. I think we'll do it. I think this team is starting to really believe, and there's some strong personalities in it. So I think we'll get the win.
Savage. Looking forward to that one. That is tonight, Thursday night. So do tune in to Birch & Co. on the RT Player and on RT News Now. We will be back, 3 of us, tomorrow on Zoom for all the 42 members, members.the42.ie, if you want to join us there for a special Lions online event. Really looking forward to catching up with all of the members in the rugby WhatsApp group as well. And we'll catch you then. Murray will be back over the weekend, Monday. He's got a busy few days ahead as the Lions tour kicks off in earnest. We're looking forward to it all. Until then, mind yourselves, thanks a mil, and take it easy.